Individual crews start removing the warheads off the 16 missiles. The crew members, though, assigned to work on the second missile had the first bolt loosened when the crew starting to dismantle the first missile suddenly stops all activity. And this hesitation occurs because once the ratchet touched the first bolt and broke its seal, the set timer utilized for detonation purposes, which activated earlier to a preset duration of time, had suddenly decreased the number by 5. This activation of the timer, located under a metal plate that has been removed from all 16 missiles, was not unusual because it was intended to be a safeguard against any person not authorized to be in the area trying to defuse the armament. And once the time clicks down on the timer and it is exhausted, it will simply set the missile to detonate on board the ship. Unfortunately, the crew thought that they had plenty of time to remove the warhead before the time on the clock was exhausted. The desire, though, to ignore the reality on the part of the crew members participating in the disassembly was stronger than the belief they personally experienced that the instrument had malfunctioned as witnessed by their own eyes. So throwing caution to the side, the machinist restarted the process of removing the bolt. But nothing had changed as each turn of the ratchet continued to reduce the timer by increments of 5. The workers are fully mystified and even dumbfounded as they look at each other while halting the process altogether. And even though they found what is happening hard to believe, the crew dismantling missile number 2 are still working, but in a more cautious manner at a slower pace. The crew that was working on missile number 1 stands back as they monitor the work being performed on missile number 2 and whether their gauge will be affected in the same manner. Nothing happened, though, on number 2's timer except for the normal depreciation due to the ship's forward motion and lapse of time. But momentarily, fearing the unknown, the work continuing on missile number 2 suddenly stops to evaluate the overall situation. The missile number 1 crew put their analytical minds together and start to believe the numerical discrepancy on their gauges to be only an aberration, an electrical or computer glitch. So they again attach the ratchet to the warhead, but as they loosen the bolt, the gauge once again becomes irregular. This time, though, the numbers disappearing from the gauge amount to 10 clicks instead of 5. The crew halts again, but this time they look around the enclosures, because how would an inanimate object know what is on their mind, while at the same time reacting to their movement? The bolt on the second missile is again loosened to investigate, and again it does not affect the timer. But the mechanic performing the task still stops his effort until given further word to finish it. The senior crew member aboard, Senior Enlisted Damian Andropov, who has been standing back supervising, takes the ratchet from the first missile crew member's hand and clicks the little tab on the tool's head to reverse the loosening process. He then leans down, attaches the tool to the bolt, and starts tightening it instead. The crew's eyes grow wide as the 20 clicks previously deducted from the gauge suddenly returns to normal. Damien, at that moment, motions to the second missile crew member to continue what they are doing, and again, to everyone's surprise, The gauge is not affected as they loosen and remove one bolt after another. Everyone watching is perplexed and horrified because even if they dismantle 15 out of 16 missiles, they still will die. All work is now halted as Commander Romanov is being briefed on the irregularity of the gauges, and after hearing the testimony of everyone involved, he makes a decision that hopefully will get them out of harm's way. And the order is simple. Remove the warheads from 15 missiles, and at a precise time and location while far out at sea, they will launch the first missile to the farthermost safe point they can imagine. At the same time, they will order the missile, while in flight, to self-destruct prior to detonation. The senior crew member and his maintenance staff returns to the missile bays, and just as before, several members proceed to each missile. But this time they maintain a strict protocol that each missile is to be defused in numerical order without exception. And just as soon as a bolt is loosened on missile number 3, the surprise looks continue, because the gauge on number 1 missile has suddenly decreased by 30. The process is halted as Damien evaluates the obvious that someone has placed a virus in their computer system that reduces the detonation time by increments of 5 when someone touches the missiles. But why didn't it affect missile number 2? The senior seaman again steps forward while utilizing the ratchet. He retightens the bolt on number 3. But this time the number of clicks missing are not returned to the gauge on missile number 1. The man looks towards the other man as he ponders the predicament. His men have touched 3 missiles. The same virus affects 2, while missile number 2, which was positioned numerically between the other 2, sits harmlessly on the lower deck of the ship. So obviously the ship has 15 missiles of death still standing and 1 missile that can be thrown away. This military man, though, knows that it is against international treaties to discard nuclear weaponry in the ocean, but who is going to know? Maybe discarding 1 missile might not give much satisfaction to the crew, but it also might make them believe that they are making headway with defusing the others. The men watching their senior are already imagining what was in his mind, but they cannot do anything to remove missile number 2's warhead off the floor until he gives the word. And as he starts to give the order, the men are already picking the warhead up off the floor. 2 men to each side of the cylinder as they start walking towards the lower deck stairwell. The cheers on deck from the crew members watching as the mechanics rear their heads into the daylight. The captain of the ship looks straight at the senior crew member, but does not say a thing. He simply watches as his crew members near the ship's railing, and there was no grand tribute to death as the members unceremoniously dropped the warhead overboard. It is better that a few fishes die than any member of this crew. The cheers on deck by all the crew members is suddenly overshadowed by the cheers from one man running out of the stairway. His screams captivate everyone as they watch him close on the senior crew member, and all he can say is the numbers have returned to normal.